Welcome on in. This is the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast presented by our friends over at Underdog. It is Super Bowl week. We got a ton to get to. We are going to unpack the game from every angle, also get into some news and notes from around the league, and of course, some best ball discussion as well. So great show coming up for you as we get ready for the big game. Let's start the show. Welcome on in. This is the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast presented by our friends over at Underdog Fantasy. I'm your host, John McKechnie, joined as always by Mario Puig. It's Super Bowl week. We are going to get into that big time here in the second half of the show, but there are some news and notes from around the league, Mario, that I wanted to kind of lead us off with. Let's start in the Bay Area, San Francisco. So Brock Purdy obviously tore his UCL early in the NFC Championship game, is going to go in for surgery on that. So that makes things even more murky when it comes to San Francisco and their quarterback situation. They obviously spent a ton to move up in the 2021 draft to go ahead and get Trey Lance. Trey Lance opens the year as the starter this year, and then obviously suffers that ankle injury, puts his season out the window pretty much early September. And then Jimmy G does not look like he's going to be back with San Francisco. So if you are the 49ers, how are you playing this? And what kind of leverage do they have one way or the other? Do you think that they have a quarterback in mind that they would like to keep? Or do you think that this is going to be a true competition come August? I know a loaded question there, but your thoughts here as it pertains to San Francisco's quarterback room.
I really have no idea. I mean, I have my own idea of what I think would make the most sense in their position, or an assortment of options that would be somewhat justifiable for them. That's not necessarily what's going to actually happen, though, and I don't know how to zero in on that. Obviously, there's a lot of smoke about the 49ers trading Lance, and I don't want to say that's like impossible. It certainly is possible. It's just that if that's what's going on, then I think it's another instance of Kyle Shanahan, John Lynch, whoever it's ultimately left with, just showing really bad personnel judgment, really bad ability to evaluate players. To have concluded anything at all in particular about Lance at this point is to be a negligent evaluator. Like, you can't look at what Lance's career has been and decide, seems like he's bad because he controls the weather in week 1 and week 2. He made some sort of decision that made him responsible for snapping his leg. It takes a conclusion like those to put any sort of meaning at all into this last season with him. And so it's possible Shanahan does that, but that's the only way he has some sort of critical conclusion on Lance based on anything that has happened, which is to say anything at all. So I think it's hard, but you need to keep some perspective on something like this, which is, requires some patience. You have to, you want to make, it's 2 years now. You want to make some kind of conclusion about Lance, but you just have to understand that you can't. And you look at like Garoppolo. He offered them some sort of baseline, but there's no proof even that Lance couldn't have offered that himself. Like, Lance was denied that opportunity from the weather and his injury. So it's like a false assumption to just think Garoppolo offers anything over Lance at all. Like, there's no evidence of that. And the other one of the other part, of course, is Purdy, who's maybe even more like emotionally stirring, like the narratives around him and the Cinderella story of it all. It grips people's senses, their better judgment, and makes them ignore things like, hey, Purdy didn't do anything. Like, he didn't do anything at all. He played against a preseason defense against the Cardinals. He put up 4 touchdowns. The rest of the time he was playing T-ball. They were hiding him, and you have to ask yourself why they were hiding him. Like, they were trying to keep the pass attempt volume under 30 every game, noticeably less than they were with Garoppolo. And it was just a cupcake schedule. I mean, we looked at that start that the 49ers had, the losing record that they had initially, and you looked at it, it's like, oh, this won't hold. They're going to go on a roll. And I didn't say that because everybody who pointed it out didn't say that because they're like, and it's because Jimmy Garoppolo is so great, or whoever plays at quarterback must be so great for this to happen. I was like, no, this is easy, and it was. So giving much meaning to Purdy's rookie season is also a negligent evaluation thing. Like it's something Shanahan could indulge, but if he's trying to make some conclusion based on anything Purdy did, uh, any conclusion beyond what it was worth, which is like he's a backup, he's a good backup, great. That's something, but it's not a basis to trade Trey Lance for peanuts when, especially Trey Lance. Let's see, he's going into his third year. I realize.
Hmm.
Uh, how much? Let's see. He's 5 months younger than Brock Purdy going into his third year next year. He's 5 months younger than Purdy. So yeah, I can see them keeping Lance and Purdy, and Purdy being the backup. I don't care about the injury. I don't know what to make of the injury, by the way. I mean, um, I guess there could have been a case study that I missed, but I really don't remember Tommy John surgery for NFL quarterback.
No.
Uh, I know it's different than throwing a baseball, but it's we're seeing like an assumption that Purdy's going to be fine for training camp, and I don't know if there's a basis for that as much as they're just kind of like hoping, like this seems like it might be the first case. So don't know what they could count in there. So anyway, I think they could move Lance. I think it would be ridiculous, assuming they're not getting some really tantalizing offer for him. It would be a ridiculous move on their part. Um, but I don't think Purdy's a factor either way, personally. So I think they go with Lance, or they trade Lance and they re-sign Garoppolo, and Garoppolo starts. I don't think Purdy starts next year.
Okay, and that goes beyond the injury detail with Purdy. It's more so just who
He
he is as a
wasn't
player.
good. He was bad. It was. I mean, I feel like I'm losing my mind, and I understand that the numbers. I know the numbers are good, but
They are.
when you watch like that Seattle game, people are talking about it as a good game. He missed so many throws, and he didn't even throw that many passes. It was one of the most dominant, like one of the most overwhelmed defenses I've ever seen. One of the most dominant scheme performances by an offense I've ever seen. The quarterback should have had 6, 7, 8 touchdowns, and people were like, "Wow, he threw 3 touchdowns." You have to admit he's a great quarterback now. Whatever. I'll hold this position. I'm not intrigued by anything Brock Purdy did. Honestly, he had poise, and that's something. It is worth something, especially for a backup. It's good to have a backup that can step in, and when everything feels like it's falling apart, and the quarterback gives some reassurance and gets you back on the game. That's great. It's just not a basis for trading Lance, which people are trying to conflate it to.
So what do you think Trey Lance could get as far as the trade market is concerned?
I really
Because I
don't
think
know.
teams are going to be able to leverage just the fact that we're 2 years into Lance's career and there's not a lot to show for it. Again, like you said, not really by his own fault, but I think that there is something to be said for teams being able to leverage that as far as what they would be sending.
Well, if they were leveraging something, I think I think it would be it would you couldn't do this if there were a ton of teams trading for Lance, but if it's only like one or two, or especially one, they can just lowball the 49ers, because the 49ers in this scenario have kind of cornered themselves into moving him. And if you don't have any actual that's not a good leverage position to start from. So they could, if they are committed to just moving Lance just for the sake of it, they could get a surprisingly little return. I don't know if it was much to do with Lance not doing anything as much as Lance's contract having two fewer years on it. Like it's great from from the projection of Lance's talent and like career abilities, the trajectory of that over a certain age span. It's good that he doesn't turn 23 for 5 more months, or sorry, 3 more months. But it's not great for the contract timing, because basically you're kind of like paying for his development time. You're almost like paying for him to kind of go to football college, and then by the time he's in theory ready to go or whatever, then he's already nearing the sort of range in a contract where one big season is all it takes for him to be a training camp holdout and get the expectation of a big contract extension. So if you're trading for Lance, you're you're probably maybe getting a high upside quarterback prospect, but also one you're going to have to make a quick decision on. And
Right.
not just as any decision, it's like a if it turns out in the like positive scenario, you're paying a lot more money than you would if you were drafting a quarterback with a first round pick in the upcoming draft.
hmm So yeah, the timing element, yeah, and as far as him being a first round pick, having to make that decision on the fifth year uh, option pickup, yeah, that does kind of add an interesting wrinkle to all this. But yeah, bottom line is it just never seems to be easy for San Francisco and their quarterback situation. No matter what it is, it's always tricky, and the
Yeah,
injuries, the
I don't know if there's
egos.
anything. I don't know if it's just bad luck with the injuries. Like, I don't know if it is possible that Shanahan's like, oh, I don't want to have a running quarterback. They get hurt too much. Like, I think that's a false conclusion. It's one he could take up. But yeah, I think part of what's made it difficult for themselves is like they just kind of have bad judgment with all of it, and they kind of they stand by things too long or bail on things too early, just kind of setting themselves back a step for every two they might make forward. And I think in this case they have to just like focus, remember why they drafted Trey Lance, look at what's actually happened with him in his career. Suppose what could have gone differently if he hadn't been hurt, and you know try to build around him and keep Purdy, I would say, since he's so cheap. But trading Lance is in my opinion a great way for them to just bring their ceiling back down to what it was like 2 years ago.
Okay. All right. That's good analysis there. Yeah, I think that there's more to Lance than what we're aware of or what we've seen to this point. And like you said, imbuing a bit of perspective, I think, is important. That they really mortgaged a lot to move up in the draft to get him. You got to get something out of him, and you didn't expect him to be a star quarterback in his first 2 years anyway. So like
Some
let's
people
go ahead
apparently
and
did though, but you're right. Like that's the way I would look at it, and I think you just said it too. But like a lot of people are basically, even if they don't mean to, they're holding him to a standard that in practice would need him to be a star level quarterback, and they don't realize they're putting it that way, but they just do, and they plow ahead, and time passes and they forget the reason they hate Trey Lance is because they you know at one point judged him for not being a Pro Bowler as a 22-year-old out of North Dakota State.
exactly like the things that I always came back to when we were studying him as a prospect was like, yeah, the film looks incredible. The production, it's hard to argue against, but you do have to wonder about the experience, the reps, the jump in level of competition, the age, and it's like, okay, this is going to take a little bit of time, and unfortunately, these first 2 years, he back up his first year, injured for basically the entirety of his first year starting. We just don't have enough sample to make any sort of judgment. So you just have to bet on, the development, the tools, that type of thing, and string it out and see why they went ahead and selected him third overall a couple of years ago. Like that there has to be that expectation that it was going to take a little bit of time for him to get there. And unfortunately, we haven't gotten to see him push through the growing pains on the field just yet. So there's a bit of a mystery still to him, but I think that all of it is still there. And I don't think that the trade return would be worthwhile for them. And like you said, as good as Purdy was, you just need to reframe what that really meant in the grand scheme. It's like he just came in and played caretaker essentially for those last 7-8 weeks of the season.
Yeah, and John, consider this for like people's ability to keep perspective on these things over these events and the significance of them over time. Uh, Imagine how many, like if you ran a poll of which quarterback is better, Trey Lance or Daniel Jones, imagine what the actual results of that would be, and think about what it would be based on. That people probably, what the hell, probably like 60% of the country would probably say Daniel Jones is better than Trey Lance or something like that. And what it's based on is Trey Lance playing in a win game, a monsoon game, and Daniel Jones playing the Vikings twice. And it's like those are the bases on which people will completely invert their understandings of players, and especially relative to each other. And these are things that can evaporate, especially in this particular case. This is an assumption, a perspective that could get negated in the span of like 10 plays. Like that's how fragile that sort of thinking is, and yet it's like common.
Yeah, it's like Daniel Jones wasn't a complete train wreck this year. Like, great, good for him. Let's move on. Before we get onto our next news item, message from our friends over at Blue Wire. So Mario came across yesterday, I believe, that Sam Howell, Ron Rivera, coach of the Washington Commanders, tabbed him as the likely next man up for Washington. So what does that mean? What are your thoughts on Sam Howell, first of all, and then what does this mean for Wentz, Heineke, and the rest of this veteran free agent quarterback market?
I actually liked Sam Howell a little bit in that he has to be better than some of these other guys, even that went ahead of, like Coral going ahead of Howell. That makes no sense.
Yep.
There's a couple others that I didn't like, but also Howell falling to the fifth, that particular falling point, that doesn't really make much sense to me. You worry about him, being a good college quarterback and not having the right tools, the right playing style to translate to the NFL. I don't know if there's anything to that North Carolina system. I haven't paid enough attention to it. I should probably go look at this.
Well, yeah,
But
he's in your backyard now. Phil Longo is at Wisconsin now.
Phil Longo is the former UNC offensive coordinator.
Yes.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't know who that is. But like for instance, the Baylor Bryles offense makes it kind of hard to evaluate the production value of the players in it, because it's basically stuff that works really well at the college level that doesn't exist in the NFL. And I don't know how similar UNC and their offense might be to that, but Howell, he had a lot of receiver help by college standards, but not his last year. He pretty much just had
No, he
Josh
didn't.
Downs there.
Hmm.
So yeah, that one year he lost a little bit, but not as much as he could have. Not enough for it to make sense for him to fall from like top 3 rounds assumption to the fifth. So and I think he's definitely better than Carson Wentz, like no questions asked. But yeah, with Howell, I guess if it works for him, it's because he manages to make his deep game translate a little to the NFL. Like he's definitely willing to take deep shots. I guess I don't have the greatest sense of how particularly good he is at it. He seems to have a sense for it. I guess I don't know as much about like his how good his throwing to that depth is, but I generally believe in the chances of a quarterback who's got like a good temperament, whatever, and a viable frame, who has some semblance of a deep ball and is willing to run and can run like Taylor Heineke somewhat meets this definition, I guess. And we're basically hoping Howell's like a little bit more toolsy version of that, or I don't know, just for some reason better version of that. But I like, with McLaurin, Dotson being there, the idea of striking deep when the safeties creep up, and if the safeties don't creep up, have Howell prepared to run 8-10 times a game. And I know that's a risky kind of thing. He could get hurt, but he's playing on a 5th-round rookie contract, so who cares? But give it a shot, and he could give you some explosiveness on modest volume, I think. But if you need him to throw regularly 35 plus times, he probably, his like moxie is not going to carry him over that level of exposure.
I think it'll take time either way, but I think this is the right move for Washington, and I'm saying this even as like one of the biggest Heineke guys out there. But I think Howell is definitely more talented than your run of the mill 5th-round quarterback, day 3 quarterback.
Yeah,
Let
yeah.
alone, I mean, he's someone that almost beat Trevor Lawrence as a true freshman when Clemson was basically a juggernaut. at that stage in 2019, and that was like early in the season as well. That kind of woke me up to Howell, even though, you know, I knew about him as a recruit. He was like the Mac Brown's first like big flip away from Florida State, entering the 2019 season. And yeah, I mean, Howell delivered, like you said, his sophomore year when they had Daz Newsome and who's it? De'Ami Brown. Yeah, who's also on Washington. You know, that he put up insane numbers. That obviously goes away his junior season, his last year at UNC. Still performs well, like you said, a little bit overweighted on Josh Downs.
He ran a lot more, didn't he? He like ran a lot more that last year. And he did
they just ran a ton in general because they had Carter and Javonte. So like that, they just kind of inverted their scheme to kind of fit the talent that they had. I don't know. Howell at least is interesting. I think that, again, this is the right move. And you know, like you alluded to, there's some serious players there for him to kind of have his game elevated by when it comes to McLaurin and Josh Doxson. Doxson, I feel like I can like already sense I'm going to have so many shares of him.
Sorry, your brain switched to Josh Doxson.
Oh, shoot. Yeah, it did. Jahan Dotson. Oh, man. Yeah, we were talking about TCU offline.
Yeah,
he played for Washington, right?
Yeah, that's what that's probably why your headcanons collided there. Their two profiles ran into the one, and they became the same guy. But yeah, the other thing about the Howell kamikaze offense this year that makes sense is, like, if it doesn't work, this is the best quarterback class in a long time. 2 years, but also it might be better than that one. Like Caleb Williams could be near or at Trevor Lawrence level for all I know. I don't know. I mean, he's different, but he's some kind of really good. And if Howell turns out to be good, Washington could kind of have their cake and eat it. Like they could just be a bad team for other reasons or whatever. But Howell might be good enough that they can flip him for like a third and still be in position to like get whatever Williams or Drake, May or whoever it might be that's otherwise worth it. But yeah, they're setting up a viable tank route if they, you know, if they can't compete, which, you know, they probably won't. They'll be able to kind of sort of just put themselves in position to bounce back in 2024. And Ron Rivera would be kind of funny. I think he kind of deserves it. It'd be funny if they're just keeping him around for a tank year. Like they just bring him back to get them to that first or second overall pick, and then say like later on.
It feels, if they do get in position to get the first overall pick, Caleb Williams is a Washington D.C. guy.
Oh yeah, they want it bad.
They want that. Dan Snyder, I feel like would try to move heaven and earth to also get Lincoln Riley to come with him.
I mean, they already did put up that huge trade for Robert Griffin too. So yeah, I don't know if there's a such thing as betting on like where Caleb Williams gets drafted, but if you can put in the extreme long shot odds for Washington, those odds are just going to get. It's going to be, you know, there's going to be every so often you see like these like narratives of destiny, and this is clearly going to be something of that sort.
And they drafted Haskins because he went to the same high school as Snyder's son, Bullis. But Williams went to Gonzaga,
probably
better football
probably
program.
An easier pick there too. But this one, it's like they're like you said, Snyder. Well, I guess he could be out for all I know. I don't know what the latest is with that idiot. But if he's still in charge of Washington, or the next idiot in charge of Washington, they're both probably thinking the same thing. Like we got to bring back the prodigal son.
Yes. Yeah, he went away to Norman, and then he went all the way to Los Angeles. Now he's coming back. He's going to bring back Washington football while he's at it. Let's go ahead and move on, talk some best ball. Before then, we got a message from our friends over at Underdog. The easiest way to get in on the action for the big game is Underdog Fantasy and their pick'em game. Just pick higher or lower on your favorite Chiefs or Eagles stats for the big game. And if you get all your picks right, you could win up to 20 times your money in a single night. Underdog keeps it super simple with their easy-to-use website and app and they are making it even easier with a special pick for the big game. Starting on Thursday, February 9th at 10 a.m. Eastern, so this offer is already live, you'll all be able to make a special pick on Jalen Hurts higher or lower than just 0.5 yards. That's 0.5 yards. He literally needs to throw for 1 yard in the game to go higher. Pair this with at least one other correct pick, max of $20 on that entry, and you could be taking on some cold, hard cash. Again, visit underdog.com or find them in the App Store. And don't forget to register with my promo code RWNFL to get your first deposit doubled up to $100. Must be 18 or older and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-522-4700 or visit npcgambling.org. All right, Mario. So again, kicking things off, use that promo code RWNFL over at Underdog Fantasy. Get a nice little welcome bonus. Get it going. But today, I wanted to talk about some bounce back candidates for the up. So we're starting to see ADP take shape a little bit. And
Hey,
I want to lead things off. Yes.
Sorry, sorry to interrupt. Just giving you a heads up. The internet monster was biting a little bit there. Just in case you got to look for the usual signals to be on alert for a drop there. Sometimes John needs to log back on as folks that are new.
Yes, to our beautiful viewers out there. But yeah, occasionally it does happen. But all right, we'll reset. So Internet Monster has gone back under the bed from what we can tell. Let's get into this underdog segment. Let's talk about some bounce back candidates. Again, use that promo code RWNFL. But as is our brand, Mario, we got to start things off talking about Kyle Pitts. So his ADP checks in at 64.2. So we're talking, a pretty significant drop off from where he was a year ago, where he was an early third round, late second type of guy. It's all well documented how the season went for Kyle Pitts, but I went ahead and looked back into his archives a little bit from this past season, and you know what, the actual advanced metrics all pointed to him performing extremely well, and maybe he was a little bit miscast. His ADOT jumped basically 3 yards in an offense that had a worse downfield quarterback, so that wasn't going to work out extremely well. I think that partially informs why the catch rate dropped off so hard, but his catch rate was so good his first season, and then of course at Florida as well. So I expect some positive regression in that sense. And yeah, I mean, he was on the air yardage, on the targets per route run, all that good stuff. All of it is, exemplary. It didn't really translate into the fantasy production that we were chasing in 2022. And then obviously he gets hurt to end the season. Bada bing, now he's, someone that goes in the 6th round of drafts. So your thoughts on him and his ability to bounce back this upcoming season?
Well, the concerns about his production, I think, could be valid even if you think he's a really good player, because I expected Arthur Smith to do more with Pitts last year. Like, it's sometimes tough to tell from afar whether things were going on in the background. Like, I don't know if some of these games where Pitts only got 30 snaps and they were giving a bunch of snaps to Parker Hesse or whoever. I don't know if that was, sometimes stuff like that can happen because a guy has like a bad ankle and they're not telling anyone about it, something like that. So there could yet be some possible explanations for why Arthur Smith seemed to not be trying to use Pitts more. And it might not be, that Pitts couldn't do whatever it was. It might have been like he, was dealing with an injury or something. But suffice to say, it was discouraging that Smith couldn't find a way to get more out of Pitts. The catch rate is the tell of the whole story here. Otherwise, I mean, I don't think it's asking much for Kyle Pitts to have a level of quarterback, passing play from a quarterback that could resemble 36-year-old Matt Ryan. Doesn't seem greedy to me to be asking for a quarterback who completes 67% of his passes at 7.1 yards per pass, while pushing for like 35 attempts a game. That's it, it's not average, it's below average. And that level of quarterback passing play was enough to get Kyle Pitts to 68 catches for 1,026 yards on 110 targets as a rookie, as one of the youngest rookies ever. He turned 21 in October of his rookie year when he did that. So that would have been a highly impressive rookie season, like the kind of data point that would put any tight end prospect on clear, 3-year window at most of Pro Bowl ascension. Like he'll get to Pro Bowl, All Pro maybe level by year 3 is what you would say, even if that player was 22, 23 years old as a rookie. Like Pat Fryermuth, for instance, turned 23 the October of his rookie year. Kyle Pitts won't turn 23 until October of this year. So people got to, it's a tough one to keep perspective on because he's such a unique case. He's incomparable in all ways, including we don't know for sure what happens when a Kyle Pitts comes along. But as much as people are kind of like tilting their brains out over how much of a fantasy bust he was this year, and just this like despairing you see from people about how like he's not Megatron yet, that stuff. I mean, you can tell I'm not subscribing to it. I think it's hysterical, and as you said, the peripheral stats, even this year, with all the disappointments it was otherwise littered with, still say he was doing a good job. What it said additionally was like the offense was failing aside from that. And again, it's the catch rate. 47.5% of his targets caught. Like, and even with that being the case, John, it seems the 1.72 yards per route run is still 86th percentile among tight ends. So think about that. His routes are 86th percentile yards per route, even while he's catching 47.5% of his targets. So what does that number go to if he's catching 56%, which is still below average, which is still something we would project Pitts to eventually get well north of? What does it look like if he's catching 65, 66? Is he 100th percentile, 99th percentile, and the highest of that figure range going back 20 years? Probably. Like that's the kind of upside that hinges here on Pitts just catching 15 more points of his catch rate, and obviously he's the kind of player profile to project for that. So it's not like, I'm not saying like if he grows a foot. It's like if he just catches a catch percentage anywhere near the league average for tight ends, anywhere near what he had his rookie year, when again he didn't even turn 21 until October. Like we're throwing out all of this, I think perfectly clear broad data basically for a 6-week just bad memory that would have easily faded over as little as like 2 or 3 good games. Like 2 or 3 good games for Pitts would change entirely his so it's like he played 10 games. If he added 300 yards over 2 games, 3 games, like he's back on that track from before, and we know that he can do stuff like that because we've seen him do
Right.
it. So it comes down to the quarterback, and I don't know, that and Arthur Smith. I'm not as high. I'm not counting out Arthur Smith. I kind of can believe that he has some kind of explanation he could give. He's just, he's not going to offer it publicly. But I am not as high on Smith as I was a year ago, and I don't know what to make of
Sure.
the quarterback situation. Like Ritter doesn't do it for me.
No, but they do have a ton of cap space. Maybe they'll be in the market to get an upgrade at quarterback. But I think bottom line here, I'm buying in on a bounce back for Pitts. Let's quickly move on to a couple other guys before we get on to the Super Bowl. Michael Pittman, obviously someone that was a 3rd round pick this past year, fell under expectations. I think Indianapolis just as a whole really just kind of wilted this past year. The quarterback situation was a mess. The offensive line took a step backwards. So, all of a sudden Pittman, who, in his career year, 2021, his average depth of target was 9.5. That dropped by 2 full yards this past year. The catch rate obviously went up, drops went down. But, there was less kind of like bang for your buck on his per target basis that this past year. Do you think that could get better this year? And do you think that you would go in on him at his current ADP, which is 52?
Uh, I'm probably not interested at that ADP, but the disclaimer I have to offer is like I'm just lower on Pittman than I think most people are, so I'm not inclined. I'm not maybe the most like reliable narrator on him. I I don't have like uh, definitive proof to offer on this. This is just something that I think when I watch the Colts offense of the past 2 years. But I thought they were force feeding him. I thought more than almost any receiver I've seen in the league, they design plays that are specifically only designed to get the ball to him. And a lot of those plays were like yards after the catch setups, like screens over the middle of the field, and there's no one there. And it's like clearly, like almost anyone else in the Colts receiver room would be better for this rep than Pittman. And they're going with Pittman anyway. Like I just feel like a lot of his production was just a policy choice by the Colts rather than something that occurred organically because of like an offense just assembling and seeing where its usage goes best. It's like they would have gotten more yardage on some of those looks, giving it to Paris Campbell, who, if nothing else, is clearly a yards after the catch guy. And so when I see targets like that happening, I don't consider his target rate as legitimate as I do some other players. And particularly when this year, I know Carson Wentz to Matt Ryan happened, and it's pretty good case to make that Ryan was much worse for Pittman's interest. But I also think the usage going up, defense is keying on Pittman that much more. These are things that I would have predicted anyway, and I would have said like that's going to be bad for him. Like I don't think he has the talent to withstand that level of exposure. I think he's a wide receiver 2, and they're trying to use him like a wide receiver 1 that they chase the receiving title every year with. I don't think he has that in him. So it makes
Hmm.
sense to me that he would struggle the way he did last year. I just might be like too. I might have expected it too much. Like I might be like too low on Pittman anyway.
Okay. All right. So perhaps last year is a little bit more indicative of where Pittman really is. So maybe not too high of a bounce back for him. But that's going to wrap it up for our underdog segment. Again, sign up at Underdog using that promo code RWNFL for that first deposit match up to $100. Again, that promo code RWNFL. Mario, let's get rolling on the Super Bowl. So again, we know it's Chiefs Eagles. We've been thinking about it for the better part of 10 days at this point. The line hasn't really moved a whole lot. We're still seeing the Eagles -1.5. Uh, now that you've had an extra week to kind of chew on this, where are you coming out with this game?
I still don't really want to pick a side. I'll pick the Eagles though if I have to. It's one of those things where um, I imagine uh, either side could win. It's just going to kind of be determined by what sort of track the game starts out at and what sort of flow it takes from there. And specifically, I guess I'm imagining that the Eagles just need Jalen Hurts to not turn the ball over on offense, and I think that should be enough because I feel like the Eagles' running based functions should be able to dictate a pretty reliable presence, a reliable return for the offense, and one that they can, of course, play off of. Oh, looks like John's internet got zapped. Um, One that they can play off of if the defense tries to get too intent on stopping the run. That's a good way to get AJ Brown or Devontae Smith behind you. So a guy like L'Jarius Sneed, he can definitely play pretty well. I don't know if he can go one on one repeatedly against either of Smith or Brown. Definitely not Brown, maybe Smith. But I don't really think Smith's worried about Sneed either. So Sneed's the best corner, uh, him or McDuffie, I guess. The other two rookies have been outside of the boundary reps a little more often with McDuffie moving more inward, which makes sense. McDuffie's short, has very short arms. Jalen Watson and Joshua Williams, very tall corners. Makes sense that they would be on the boundary. Sneed's pretty tall for a corner too. So those guys, the two rookies in Sneed, I figure are going to be the ones who are mostly against AJ Brown and Devontae Smith. Like if you put Trent McDuffie on AJ Brown or Devontae, it's asking for trouble. So the idea of two rookies cumulatively facing like 60% of the time or more going against AJ Brown and Devontae Smith seems like something that's difficult to cover up for a defense. And if Jalen Hurts is operating toward his usual standard, and if the Eagles have a decent game plan, which they usually do, then I need Hurts to kind of just have an inexplicable failure, turning it over specifically, probably, um, to explain how the Eagles get off that track, because that track as a base sort of occurrence, I think, suits the Eagles. But if things fall apart, if an unexpected failure occurs with Hurts, then that would be a way that the formula gets off, because if the Chiefs get ahead, then the Eagles can't just lean on that running game quite as much. They're going to have to start calling more pass plays. And I don't think Hurts is the kind of guy that you want going over 30 pass attempts in a game like this. I think he can go over 30 sometimes, but Hurts is not a standout natural passer. He's good at like a couple kinds of plays, and he plays really smart, so his limitations don't show up. He's good at, he's good at anticipating his own limitations and keeping them out of the way. It's just Steve Spagnuolo is going to call, more ambitious disguised coverages than he has at any point this year. Hurts needs to play well. He's got to keep his wits about him, to keep the plan on track. If he falls off that track, I worry about overexposure. I worry about if Hurts has to throw 35, 40 times because Mahomes got, 8, 10 points on him, then I worry about Hurts just not being himself at that point and like deteriorating to some sort of just bad quarterback who would have never made it this far in the season. But if the Chiefs do not pull ahead, 5+ points or whatever, then the Eagles can keep going back to the run. And I do think Hurts is like a big game quarterback. He's not like scared of the stage or anything. It's his first time at this level of competition, but I don't think there's any reason to worry about him failing for like nerve reasons. It would be more just fluke, or like the Chiefs just playing really great. With that said, the reason that I'm picking the Eagles anyway is that if Jalen Hurts plays the way he usually has, and if the Eagles can run the ball, that I think we have reason to expect them to here, then that's a tougher spot for Pat Mahomes on the other side, because Mahomes is the best quarterback. He doesn't need nearly as much help as other quarterbacks. There's no AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert propelling Mahomes' numbers. It's pretty much just Kelsey and a bunch of guys who aren't that great, but Mahomes makes them kind of productive enough anyway. It's just that it's tough to take that ragtag group of receivers and keep that formula working against corners like the Eagles got. Like they got Bradbury and Slay outside. They can play man. They can play zones. They seem to be getting better at the latter over the course of the last 2 years with Gannon there. So they, with the ability to be interchangeable in the secondary with their coverages, there's also a decent chance that the Eagles themselves do what I was just talking about with Spagnuolo on the Chiefs side. Like um, maybe the Eagles surprise Andy Reid. Maybe bye week Andy Reid. Normally such a big problem when Reid has that extra week to game plan. Maybe Gannon kind of keeps a step up with it that Reid isn't used to seeing. Like maybe the Eagles actually trick Mahomes at a point or two. It's not likely, but it's stuff that can happen. And in any case, with Slay and Bradbury on the outside, it's tough to see any of the receivers for the Chiefs doing anything against that. It's like it's got to be down the seam, it's got to be in the slot. And Avonte Maddox, getting him on Marquez Valdez-Scantling is the goal. If you're the Chiefs, you want to get the 5'9" Maddox on Marquez Valdez-Scantling. Valdez-Scantling largely had the best game of his career against the Bengals because he kept getting Mike Hilton, a 5'8", 5'9", 180 slot corner, and there's just not anything a guy like that can do against 6'4", sub 4'4" sort of receiver like Valdez-Scantling, especially when the deep ball is there. So the Eagles, if they can get a pass rush going so lively that Valdez-Scantling can't get deep on Maddox, at that point, I'm really worried for the budgeting of the Chiefs passing game, because you can assume some sort of automated, 100 yards on 10, 12 catches for Travis Kelsey. Oh, hey, Alan, what's up?
What are you talking about? I'm John McKechnie.
Oh, yes. John had to go to the barber. I think that's why I walked away without saying anything. Yeah, Alan, I was just talking about I was trying to go through the whole scenarios I could see unfolding with the the Super Bowl here, and basically I was just gonna say the Chiefs, if they can't get Valdez-Scantling going again, I'm kind of worried for them because I think Valdez-Scantling is the only player they have other than Kelsey who can threaten down the seam. And Bradbury Slay outside makes it tough, even for Valdez-Scantling to get open over there. So they got to get Valdez-Scantling on Avonte Maddox, that tiny slot corner, because they might have the Eagles might have Chauncey Gardner-Johnson on Travis Kelsey trying to bracket him, and it comes down to Valdez-Scantling. So that's kind of like a scary proposition to me, even though, like I was saying, Mike Hilton, Valdez-Scantling was getting the better of him in that same spot. Avonte Maddox, pretty similar player or similar build anyway to Mike Hilton. And Valdez-Scantling definitely fast. And then that could be a problem for the Eagles. But just the same, if Valdez-Scantling is not a problem for the Eagles, I don't know how they budget a passing game, not to the customary levels that Mahomes is used to anyway.
What are the odds that MVS can have 2 big games in a row? I mean, I don't even think we've seen that ever in his career. So,
yeah, I really don't know, but I would have figured no, but I also would have figured he wouldn't have been able to even do what he did in the last game. So we'll see. I mean, it's asking a lot of him, though. I mean, he's struggled most of the year, like he struggled most of the time in Green Bay. He's not even really in theory supposed to be a guy who gives you lots of yardage, lots of catches. It's more like he's supposed to be a guy who keeps the safeties off of your other receivers. But in this game, with the injuries that they have, and with Slay and Bradbury taking away the outside, it's like those other guys don't exist, So it's like it really is falling on Valdez-Scantling, and he really is in a role that he's never played before.
All right. You know what this team reminds me of, Mario? This is like with Mahomes. It's like those early LeBron James teams where it was LeBron and a bunch of just like kind of guys that they overpaid just to stand on the perimeter, but yet somehow they got to the finals. But when they got to the finals, they didn't have the big time results.
Yeah, if the Eagles win, that would be exactly the same thing, I would say, because it really is crazy how much they changed the name from Spencer Ware to Damian Williams to Darrell Williams to Jerick McKinnon, and it's the same result every time. It's just the Mahomes part that's there, and it's like these other guys. It's like Darrell Williams, Jerick McKinnon to vet minimums this offseason. No one cares. So everybody knows it's Mahomes, and those other guys just kind of need to stand around. And as long as they do that, the Chiefs are usually pretty tough. But I just think something about those Eagles corners, and I guess to be fair, the Chiefs, their receiver injuries, that definitely makes it harder on them too.
So which no-name pass catcher? I mean, because I'm thinking about betting one of these like total scrubs to catch a touchdown. Which third-string tight end? I mean, we know Kelsey is probably going to score. It's a good bet. But is it like a Jody Fortson at huge odds? I mean, it always seems like who's going to be the second guy to catch a touchdown after Kelsey if you had to pick, and you're not allowed to say Juju.
Right. So Kelsey in his 17 playoff games has something insane like 123 catches. It's generally hard to budget any usage at all for another tight end when a tight end is getting 123 catches per 17 games. But the guy who plays a lot of snaps for them most weeks is Noah Gray. I don't know how to describe exactly what he does, but he at once runs a decent number of routes, but also is not seriously considered on those routes. So that he runs these routes and doesn't do much with them might not really be his fault. Like he's pretty athletic. He's kind of like an H-back, fullback kind of build guy. But he's always playing 35, 40 snaps. He's just one of those guys that you kind of don't notice that much because he's just out there doing, structural kind of grunt work. But if he's out there 30, 40 snaps, then, particularly in a game, if we're projecting lesser returns for the outside receivers, it's like, yeah, that all could just fall on Kelsey. If Kelsey's normally on 123 catch rate for 17 games, maybe in this game he's on more of like 132 or something because those outside receivers don't do the lifting they usually do. But particularly if the Eagles are trying to, the Chiefs are trying to target the middle of the field and those linebackers, and especially if like Kaiser White and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson are like trying to bracket Kelsey every play, Noah Gray could be someone that they try to get on like TJ Edwards or one of those other linebackers and see if they can get Gray the ball in the space where, the defense is selling out to double Kelsey. It's like they're leaving some other spot open. Maybe Gray's running near that area, maybe off of play action in the red zone. I don't know. But for the snaps that you're getting, probably Gray, that's the best value. Fortson's a guy who's more like, he doesn't play many snaps, but when he does, they know they're, throwing him the ball 1 out of 4 times or something.
Right.
I don't think he's played in a while, though. I don't know if he's been hurt.
Right. But you just said something interesting, though. It's like when he's in the game, it's usually when the Chiefs are like on the 4-yard line and they do throw to him. Right. I mean, like,
he's like a former receiver guy. He's not even like a real tight end. He's just a short field, big receiver to them who can line up in line.
Yeah. So if the Chiefs do win and you go by the projected points and you go by the projected total for the game, I mean, they need to score 4 touchdowns. Let's just say we carve off Kelsey for 2 of those. Whether it's running or passing, who do you think are the most likely players to have the other 2 touchdowns?
I guess the other guy you got to keep in mind is Blake Bell. It's him and Fortson, it seems like, are kind of fighting for those last 15 snaps at tight end. But anyway, thinking through.
Is it Pacheco? Is it McKinnon?
I think it's Pacheco, but I also am like not able to answer that question any differently. Every single time I see McKinnon do anything, it's like the defense just forgot to cover him, so I can't. It's like I think Pacheco can make the same play and other additional ones. So yeah, I'll say Pacheco. But if the Eagles, if they leave TJ Edwards coverage on the flats and everybody's covered and McKinnon's sitting over in the flats open, then the ball will go to him. And against a guy like Edwards, there's a chance that even McKinnon can make a miss because Edwards is like a 5-second 40 kind of linebacker. So there's something that could be there. It's like it comes down to the matchups, how they match up individual players, and what kind of concepts, what kind of depth of the field everybody's running. But to me, Pacheco has the most like base function viability. It's like especially if there's any sort of running to be done, it's like he's their only option, I think. Unless Clyde Edwards-Helaire plays. But
you just took my joke. You took my line. I was just going to
say. Sorry.
He is activated. I was going to say, so I guess you're not projecting Clyde Edwards-Helaire for it. But hey, Mario, let's stop it here because John had some tech issues. So what everyone wants right now is they want a score prediction from you right now. So take a deep breath here and, think about you don't have to say the actual score. You could say, hey,
I already said one and I'm trying to remember what I said. I don't want to seem like I'm just like changing
this
it every
is what you
time.
could do, Mario. You could say this team by this many points. You could say like Eagles by a touchdown or Eagles by 4 or Chiefs by whatever. So what do you believe is the most likely?
I'll say 27-24 Eagles.
Okay, so you like the Eagles and the points. All right. Anything else to add before we conclude?
No, thanks for coming on. John's internet is the devil. We got to do something about that.
Yeah, he's got to plug in, man. He's got to plug in. All right, everybody. Just remember that the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Go over and use code RWNFL. They'll deposit match you up to $100. And we're 2023 way too early best balls have already started. Have you played one yet, Mario? I'm already 4 deep.
I was actually waiting for that big contest that they're launching
Monday.
on Friday, the big board, I believe it's called. So I'm planning on going in. I'm sure a lot of people are. They better get their servers ready. There's going to be a lot of people going in when they launch that one.
Yeah. So I've already done already, and I know that you guys talked about running backs last week, but Walker has been dropping to the late second round in some of these, and I have him marked as like pick 12 overall. He's my dynasty RB1. I understand the warts on him, but he's the one where if you're picking on, the 1-2 turn, there's no great options. So you might as well take the guy that you prefer. And it seems like there's that tier from like 11 to like 18 where it's just a bunch of players, so you might as well just forget ADP, take the ones you want. Here's John. Hey, Johnny, we just concluded the pod. We're about to sign off here unless anything else. We did our outro. So say goodbye, John.
Bye, everybody. Go Birds.
All right. Hey, give a score prediction for you.
Let's go Eagles 30, Chiefs 17.
Oh, wow.
Blowout. A little bit of
blowout. Blowout City. All right. And who gets MVP? I forgot to ask both of you. John, you first. Who gets MVP?
I like Hurts to get it, but if I'm going a little bit longer shot, Hassan Reddick.
Okay. Mario, MVP.
I'm I'm going with a Larry Brown style pick that just doesn't make any much sense. Let's say Reed Blankenship.
Whoa. Okay.
Does he play safety for the Eagles? Is
there
that
you
the
go.
safety?
You can call it that.
Some guy pick 6 for the Eagles, something like that. I don't know.
All right, you heard it here first. Now, if that hits, you're basically winning a yacht if you put down $1. So, all right, everybody, thanks for joining the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Have fun watching the Super Bowl.